Okay, as we close to the end of semester, uh, almost three lectures are pending to completion of our lecture series. In today's lecture 6, I'll be discussing part 3 with regard to educational planning. And this essentially will cover approaches to educational planning. We have basic educational planning, or the common or major educational planning that will be discussed relating to educational institutions. Okay, so what are the approaches to educational planning? There are about 4 common educational planning approaches. The first one is human resources development approach, with the abbreviation of HRDA. Second is social demand approach, SDA. And third one is manpower requirement approach. And then we have cost benefit and rate of return analysis approach. These two goes together. We could discuss the cost benefit and then later rate of return analysis. So to the best of this lecture, okay, what I'm saying is that we could discuss cost benefit as a separate, and then rate of return analysis, but they almost go together, and I will try to the best to give what is required so that you get understand the difference between these two approaches. Let's start the first one. I did forget the fifth one, cost-effective approach. So we have almost 5 approaches to be covered in this class. Let's start with the first one. First one is the so-called social demand approach, SDA. Social demand approach. What is social demand approach in educational planning? The term or this approach referred to as method in educational planning. Approach is just methods of how you plan. It's a method in educational planning which sees education as a public social services. That being the case, it is a necessity and inalienable. No one can be alienated. No one should be segregated from accessing that services. Inalienable right to all student who desires. And therefore, this gives implication that the social demand approach is just a public response to ensure that citizens have rights, and that right must be met by all of them to access the educational opportunities. We know, and we have discussed in earlier classes, that the human rights statement on education as a right to human being is also limited to the levels. To most of developing countries talk about the primary education, but of recent there's this new term, basic education, minimum level education a person will need to acquire skills necessary for social and economic activation. But with this social demand approach, education is treated as a public social services, and every citizen in that particular state has the right to access to education as desires. Condition for social demand approach to be implemented, or things you have to consider when you want to implement this social demand approach. And again, I would also ask you to go and read and discuss education and training policy, so that at the end of this lecture, you should ascertain educational planning in Tanzania is featuring in which approach. Okay, the condition which you need when you want to implement a social demand approach is that you need accurate data projections. This is very important, because otherwise you will fail to achieve the goal or objectives. You need accurate data projection in the following areas: demography, that's about population characteristics. You need to be aware, you need to have data on the population characteristics, but I also need to have data on the student growth rate within the educational system. This is very important because it will determine absorbing capacity of educational system. Then you need to have teacher requirement projection, okay, as per education system growth, and this should also be featuring to sectors. We have primary, we have secondary, and we have tertiary. These are the areas which you need to very much focus when you want to project teacher requirements within the education system. How many teachers are required in primary education, how many are required in secondary education, and how many are required in tertiary education. All this is very important if you want to plan effectively planning for social demand approach, because it determines absorbed capacity of the system. Then you have to have accurate data on educational infrastructure projection, what you need to ensure that you provide best education in the country. Infrastructure, talk about physical infrastructure, talk about electricity, talk about buildings, talk about internet, talk about etc. Okay, infrastructure projection. Then you need to also to have accurate data on educational costs and ensure that it's being constant, no inflation, which is difficult to quantify, because you know that costs are variables. They change with time, and there are so many factors influencing costs in education that some of them are internal, others are external, and therefore we have to ensure that the cost of education is controlled as constant. And also need to also have accurate data on demand for education, or that will continue to be greater than supply, because you are talking about demand. Every citizen has the right, but supply must sometimes be limited in terms of space and time. So these are things which you need to consider when you are planning education, by considering the public demand, or in other words, you are considering the social demand approach. What are the advantages of social demand approach? Advantage of social demand approach is that it encourages mass education and the mass literacy. That's quite correct, because every citizen who desires will get education, and therefore you also expect to have literacy will be higher as compared to illiteracy. Second advantage, it is easy to defend, since the philosophy of the approach is the satisfaction of the educational needs of the people. So if a politician, this much you pray, it is very easy to defend, okay? Because what is the logic that one will get education and other will not get education, since all we are taxpayers? And therefore, if we all pay taxes, then we need also to have education as the basic right to every citizen. But also, it is an instrument for building egalitarian society. You create, you talk egalitarian, talk about equality and equity should be observed. Okay, society, there will be no disparities in terms of accessing education opportunities, because all are given equal opportunity to access education within the scope. Therefore, we talk about building egalitarian society. There will be mental equality because citizens have equal access to educational opportunities. Again, it can show the planner the resource that can be allocated to each level of education, as long as certain existing trends continue and if private demand is to be satisfied. Because I talked about when you are planning for demand approach, you have to envision of all education sectors from primary, secondary, post-secondary. You have to capture all the subsectors and their capacity to absorb. And then it democratizes education opportunities in society. It's democracy. Public is willing to offer education to all. It's societies who can choose to go in or not. So it's the kind of democracy in education opportunities given to the society members. Okay, and then also it promotes a sense of national unity and the equalization of educational opportunities, as I've discussed in the egalitarian issue. Okay, what are some limitations or challenges, some issues which might hinder achieving this ambition to ensure that all students have education? First, it requires sufficient number of qualified teachers to match recommendable teacher-student ratio. Okay, you need a high number of qualified teachers if you want to offer quality education, which sometimes is difficult because training teachers also requires some resources. It's expensive, and also, of course, also joining teacher education is optional to those who want to further education to post primary education. So sometimes you find that you're gonna have that ambition to offer demand education to all public, but you are faced with the limitation with the staffing because of limited number of qualified teachers that will match the recommendable teacher-student ratio if you want to offer quality education. But again, it is too expensive to implement. That's very true. We are implementing the so-called fee-free education under this education and training policy, fee-free education. And this in TZ is for O level and A level. Now, most of the education expenditures, especially current expenditures, bites a huge portion of our national cake. So sometimes it compromises the quality of education when you implement this approach of social demand, because we are talking about the three issues we have to consider when you want to produce a quality education. You have to balance of the three. Talk about cost, talk about quality, talk about quantity. This is also called referred to as the iron triangle. Okay, the iron triangle in providing education. So sometimes because of this expensive expensive, too expensive, or too higher cost involved in implementing social demand approach, I find that sometimes many states do not match it 100%. Okay, but also it may lead to economic stagnation or decline of employment amid amounting debts or burdens. Stagnation because we need also to invest in economic development. Okay, we need to have strategic projects in the country. For example, Tanzania, we have this SGR, we have Mwalimu Nyerere Dam, and the other ongoing projects which are for stimulating the economic development of the state. If a larger portion of the budget will go to this social services like education, which is not bringing back the income in the short run, then you're likely to suffer, to stagnate, or to slower economic development progress. It is very important to note that one, because we talk about more expenditure than income. But also the approach has no control over factors such as price. You see, we talked about being stable or constant cost. This is not realistic, okay? Because prices have fluctuated on daily basis. Depends on some changes in dollar, but also there are so many factors which makes cost not stable. So sometimes it's very difficult to control because of that. Sometimes prices will go higher, and therefore you find that financing of education becomes a burden to the state, and therefore not realistic. But also the approach has no control over absorption capacity of economy for the trained personnel. You see, you produce many graduates, but some with irrelevant skills and technology needed in the labor market. And because public cannot absorb all the graduates, it's now adds to the problem of educated unemployment. And therefore, today you have also to discuss why social demand approach is a devil to development of many developing countries, or why social demand approach is a contributing factors to educated unemployment. Go and discuss it. You can have so many sources, but mostly it's because since everybody needs education, sometimes priorities will not be considered, and therefore there will be overproduction of same skills, and therefore it comes to labor market, not possible to absorb all the graduates. But also the approach does not in any way lay claim to whether the resources expended are economically acted on. To that extent, the approach is poor, because there's no optimization of resources. Just because people want education, spend education. There's no optimization of resources. So those are some limitations of social demand approach in education planning. And therefore, the rest remain for you in your own discussion. Others you go and lead on, but the approach does not provide the guidance we need as to how to best meet the identified needs. There's no need identification, just provide education. Adds too much to educational budget. I've said cost. Does not consider the absorption capacity. It's repetitive. Okay, the approach is usually very difficult to measure, but not impossible, especially when compulsory education is not in operation. It becomes difficult to measure or to make some evaluation. Okay, second approach is the so-called human resources development approach, HRDA. This one is when you are planning education in relation to national development. Okay, we are now in the verge of launching 2050 national vision, development vision. Now, under human resources development, this system approach that relates manpower and educational planning to national development, which encompasses economic, cultural, social, and political development in building of national identity and integrity. It focuses on the human resources needed in these different sectors of production or social sectors, okay? And therefore, it is very important that you think or scrutinize which level of education has to be massively invested, what subjects should be given priorities, because we are just looking for how we transform human skills related to the production or serving societies. Therefore, the focus is how education will match national development. It focuses on a broader range of factors involved in human resource development rather than on a simple heads count in skill and professional work together categories. First thing we understand, okay, it's what needed in the human, what is needed in the national development, which will account on how we plan on skills provision, skills and knowledge provision. Nowadays, you see in Tanzania, for example, from last year 2024 and this 25 ahead, most of the politicians, president, and the helping organs, they are all heightening the need to provide the technical education as a requisite skills to fill the gap between the higher education, lower education in these subsectors of production, industrial, so that people will acquire skills which can be useful in self-employment, but also supporting employment in industry and some other sectors. You see, this is how you think in practice. You give skills which are needed to match with the national development. To meet the country's needs for human resources, educational planners must give defined answers to the following questions. Those are the guiding questions when you want to plan education and a human resource approach. First, what educational level will be emphasized? Primary, secondary, or higher education? It's very important, okay? Where you want to massively invest in providing education. Okay, should numbers or educational qualities determine the education system orientation? Do you want to provide education in terms of quantity or in terms of quality? Okay, you count number of graduates or quality of education produced. As one of the scholars have said somewhere, that it's not number of years one will spend in education system, but the quality of learning one will acquire after graduation is very important. So it must determine whether we want to focus on the number of graduates or want to focus on the quality of the graduates. It is very important on addressing the needed skills. But also, what subject area should you invest in science? Nowadays, we're talking about STEM. Okay, now this is the move of the country. STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and innovation. Now this is the move of the country. Okay, this is under the human resources requirement approach. Okay, what subject should you focus on? Science. Sometimes even these loan facilitating organs to higher learning will also give condition that those who are taking science will be given 100%. All this is to encourage people to meet with what nation need in terms of human resource development. Also, should formal education take precedence over non-formal training? Okay, do we want to incorporate everything in formal training in our curricula, or others can be left to non-formal? And from we talk about those training which are required for providing soft skills or some bridging knowledge and skills to what one has acquired in formal training and in informal training. How are human resources moved in the internal direction? It's very important. Okay, talk about labor mobility. So these are the key questions which you have to be addressed when education planning is focusing on the human resources need approach. What are the advantage of this approach? Advantage of this approach is first talent acquisition and retention. Okay, because you are focusing on the skilled skills, therefore you are likely to promote talents, but also retention. You have to expect some people will stay long in their career because they have specialized on that particular area. It helps in recruiting, selecting, and retaining qualified and competent staff, ensuring that the educational institution has the right mix of skills and expertise, okay, because they are available in the market, unlike social demand. Ensuring a high level of teaching quality and expertise contribute to overall success in education program. Second is training and development, okay, also will be guided and focused. It is very important, okay, it's very important. Advantage, human resource management facilitates ongoing training and development program for faculty and staff, enhancing their skills and keeping them up to date with the latest educational practices. This based on their area of specialization, but also improve skills, contribute to better teaching methods and overall enhancement of the learning. So these are some of the advantages of HRA in educational planning, and therefore we have to make comparison with the social demand approach, and then you come out with in your discussion which one is more prevailing and which one is more pertinent in the TZ education policy context. Another advantage is performing evaluation is very simple. Workforce diversity also is very much encouraged because you are not focusing in one specialty, but in many specialties as per need of national development. But it's very easy to evaluate performance because you have those frameworks for appraisal will be mainly possible because staff will be evaluated based on the area of performance or their accountability. And last is conflict resolution. It is very easy to handle conflicts in the grievances, promoting harmonious work environments because of those required resources. When you are employing, you have the right personnel, so they will do the right work. And even the raise conflicts, it's very easy because it's within their right occupation. A positive work environment fosters collaboration and teamwork, creating a conducive atmosphere for effective educational planning and execution based on the mix-up of the skills. Talk about establishing departments with similar or with the same qualification that will serve the purpose. But disadvantage also cost and the budgetary constraints. Sometimes to have comprehensive map of HR needed is cumbersome and therefore becomes impossible to implement in developing countries. Have not invested much on that area. Okay, but also bureaucracy in the red tape, excessive HR processes and the procedure may lead to bureaucracy and administrative burden, which also hinder implementation of HR approach in educational planning. Okay, but also resistance to change. Sometimes when you introduce hiring of staff with their area of specialty, those existing staff may resist change because of those some fear of losing their job, etc. Over emphasis on quantitative metrics also cannot be advantageous to the planning process. Sometimes we need also qualitative. Okay, and then on ethical concern, promotion dismissal may be subject to ethical concern and biases because sometimes you need to promote people based on what they have been specialized, or you fire those one with lacking specialization, but also they have served the organization. So sometimes it also compromises some ethical concern. Okay, if there's unfair practice, it can lead to a decline in morale in performance and therefore negatively affecting learning environments. Okay, manpower requirements are more or less like human resources, but the difference that manpower requirements This is maps with what is required in the market. Okay, that one was on what we produce based on the national development. This one is based on what is needed in the market. Sometimes this also face some challenges because it's difficult to have data that will match every occupation with the required number of staff, and therefore you find that some of the field will have overproduction of graduates, others will be least in number of graduates. For example, TZ is a good example. We have so many graduate teachers in the market as compared to some of the fields. This is because of the manpower requirement. Okay, sometimes market will require some kind of skills. So if people will be registering for further education based on what's needed in the market, sometimes market will flourish, and therefore leftover will be always in the labor market. So we talk about the surplus. Surplus will affect in the production process. Okay, when you want to do a manpower approach, this is what you should do. You have to find out how many jobs will be vacant in the economy, which is very difficult again. At the end of the target year, what kind of skill will be required in the economy? It's difficult. How many students are required in the education system in order to produce one number? So you see, this one is focusing on the labor market, which always is also fluctuating because some of the industries will be producing based on the demand, and if that demand will change also, they will cut off production, and therefore also will lead to reduce of the need for employment. That is, list the number of workers by sector. It's a tiresome activity which cannot be taken easily. Okay, it's not easy to quantify all this area. It's very expensive. Needs a good survey, and also needs also vary from year to year. Advantage, it gives an important guidance on the evolution of the educational qualification of the labor force. It's true. People will upgrade based on what's needed in the market. It aims at self-sufficiency in manpower resources, which is essential for manpower requirement. But it enables educational planners to examine the gaps and the imbalances in educational output to improve their planning process. It enables planners to evaluate whether and how the education system is meeting the requirement of the labor, but also the approach offer a useful guide on the required changes in the education system. What should be produced and what should be maximally produced, and where to increase or to reduce it in terms of production. Okay, disadvantage is very obvious. You can discuss, but it tends to confine itself to the high level manpower needed in the modern sector, of ignoring the education requirement of the unskilled and the semi-skilled labor force, which form the bulk of the labor force. Some of the labor market we need some semi-skilled and unskilled, and therefore not always need the skilled labor. So if you obscure that, definitely you will not achieve. You will produce in surplus. It tends to limit education to strictly producing manpower while ignoring optimum resource allocation, but it also ignores the consideration of cost involved in the capacity. The approach relies on existing labor market and the future, which is also difficult to quantify, but all the approach relies on borrowed employment classification and education requirement for each job category from the Western world, and in developing countries cannot operate well because we have not established a mechanism of detecting labor need on timely basis. Another approach is cost-effective approach, which goes with the cost analysis, rate of return analysis. Cost effectiveness is a tool that may be used by educational planners to compare the cost and effectiveness of 2 or more programs, alternatives with similar objectives. And this they talk about cost effectiveness. Talk about minimizing cost. Okay. Okay. Maybe when you want to offer education for all, should we expand size of schools so that all will go in the morning, or we can use same buildings? One cohort will attend teaching in the morning, others will attend in the evening. Can we use also online? So there are so many approaches within cost effective. You find out which is the least cost approach to offer education. If expanding classrooms will save minimal costing to provide education for all, we adopt that one. But if we can use few classes, but we can use this so-called exchange program. Same buildings are being used in the morning and in the night, or to serve the cohort. Also, if that is the minimum cost, we can use the same. But you see, there's also to consider about teachers. Will you use same teachers, or what will be happen in the teaching learning process? So cost-effective analysis require both detailed accounting of the cost of each alternative and the common outcome. So you have objective and you find how many ways to achieve that objective. The least cost-effective approach alternative would be opted and therefore implemented. The product of a cost-effective study is the cost-effectiveness ratio for each alternative. It's beyond the scope of this class to involve mathematics of this nature, but just understand that in cost-effective, we are comparing, we have the same objective. We want all to have education. What are the alternatives of assuring that all have education? We have a list of alternative 1, 2, 3, and then which one has the least cost? That one will be adopted and implemented. That's the essence of cost-effective approach. Okay, you go from maybe this evening program, morning program, etc., etc. Those are the approaches we're talking about. But also, when you want to conduct a cost-effective approach, it goes with the steps: identify viable alternatives. We call them interventions for improving elementary math score, for example. That one with the least cost will be implemented. Step 2, locating reliable impact studies for each alternative. Step 3, estimating the cost of each alternative. Step 4, calculating the cost-effective ratio, and then selecting the least one. At least make sure that you know these steps, because sometimes I will give you a probing question of how you can apply this cost-effective analysis. Okay, similar to that one, the so-called cost-benefit and the rate of return analysis. Cost-benefit and the rate of return analysis. This one is different from cost-effective. Cost-effective is about choosing the least alternative to meet the same goal. For example, I've said the goal is to ensure that all school-going age acquire basic education, and that is compulsory. Then, which program will be useful to meet all? Should we expand classrooms? Should we have exchange programs? Should we do, so that one which list with the least cost will be opted. But for this one, cost-benefit analysis, sometimes also called benefit cost analysis, is a systematic approach to estimating the strength and the weakness of alternative. It's more of economy. This cost-effective, cost-benefit, and rate of return, these are economies approaches. They are very much used in economics of education. You have to have at least some skills of quantifying economic measures. It is used to determine options which provide the best approach to achieve benefit while preserving savings, for example, transaction activities, etc. A cost-benefit analysis may be used to compare completed or potential causes of action and to estimate evaluate the value against the cost of decision, project or policy. It is commonly used to evaluate business or policy decision. So you see, after implementing a project, then you make an evaluation. During the monitoring and evaluation process is when you can find out whether the approach is beneficial or not beneficial. Or if we are, for example, what is the economic benefit of fee-free education and compulsory? What's the economic benefit? Are we achieving any benefit from investing in that kind of education? If the answer is yes, we implement. If no, we cut off. That's the essence of cost benefit and rate of return. Okay, so cost benefit analysis is often used by organizations to apply the desirable of given policy. It is an analysis of, so it's a better policy approach than the previous one. It is an analysis of the expected balance of benefit and the cost. And I've said, what is the advantage if the government will decide to implement education by itself without involving the private sector, or if what will happen if we deregulate education provision services? You find in any approach we find the advantage. Okay, if we leave education provision in hands of private, okay, we're likely to suffer because that is much focused on the profit. Therefore, those from poor families will not be able to acquire educational skills. That's very important. But when we talk about cost-benefit analysis, it is often used by organizations to analyze and apply the policy that has been under implementation. It is an analysis of the expected balance of benefit and the costs, including an account of any alternative and the status. So, as I've said previous, cost benefits and the cost efficiency, they are approaches of the same, but one is very sensitive in cost minimization. The other one is very sensitive on the profit you gain by implementing certain policy. If we offer fee-free education, what advantage do we get as a nation? That's the key question on the issue of cost benefit. Cost benefit analysis helps predicting whether the benefit of a policy outweighs its costs, and by how much relative to other alternatives. This allows the ranking of alternative policies in terms of a cost-benefit ratio. Okay, so a generic cost-benefit analysis has the following stages. First, you define the goals and objectives of the action. Second, list alternatives actions. 3, list the stakeholders dubious and for discussion. Select the measures and the measurement or cost benefit. Predict outcomes of cost and the benefit over the relevant time period. Convert all costs and the benefit into a common occurrence technique. Then apply discount rate. Calculate the net present value of action and observation. Perform sensitivity analysis. Adopt the recommended. So you see, this is it's higher technical, but has to have this clue of what goes on the process of determining the cost benefit project or policy implementation. So from this is step 3 to step 6, so-called net present value, which is economic technique yet to be covered in higher classes. Okay, so for example, the cost benefit and rate of return, according to Jimenez and the patrons, 2008, they studied worldwide education spending as percentage of gross domestic product, GDP. You find that education spending is increasing annually. From 1970s to 2000, you find that there is higher rise in educational spending. More specifically, during 1990s and early 2000 or 2000 or 20, the end of 20th century, you find that there was a skyrocketing of the educational spending when there was a massive demand of education. And this also shows or depicts on what has been understood as the advantage of investing in education, which is very much influencing most of the countries to invest in education as one of the tools to promote development. Also, you find that there is standardized age earning profile by the same author, Jimenez and the patrons. You find there's a comparison study between primary graduates to higher learning graduates, as university graduates, with a comparative earning profile. You find that university graduates gain more benefit. Investment in university education is more beneficial as compared to even other lower levels. These are just some examples of how we can compare benefit in investing in education. And the advantage of this approach is that it improves decision making by providing critical information. You always want to invest in what pays you back. It enhances understanding of project goals and how they relate to one another, helps to compare information, increase chances of success, improving project planning. It's because all of it you're being forced with the profit in whatever you're trying to undertake. And want to think of value for money. Government is building schools all over the country. We need to know the advantage or the benefit of all that huge investment that will always give back a positive benefit. And as I approach to the conclusion, challenges on implementing cost-benefit analysis and the rate of return, objections to cost-benefit analysis of education in early 1960s. Okay, it is very difficult and tiresome to compute all this, especially for planners who are novice. Okay, but also there's also a question of interrelationship between ability and education. Is it necessary that education will raise ability, or sometimes will the ability be independent of education? That's also a question to answer, because it has been observed of some being highly educated, but also when it comes to performance, they demonstrate low ability. And also in early 60s, there was critics on this move of for calculating benefit before you venture. That was not possible because of the need of manpower. By that time, many countries in developed countries were emerging nations, so there was no room for calculating the benefit you want to gain from investing in education. But also there is issue of education. If we turn to think of cost benefit, education now tends to be in this model of triangle. There is a sieving of graduates. Start with many, they graduate few because of these cost benefit issues. But if you could talk of social demand, that is, you don't have this sieving approach. They enter and they graduate. Okay. But another thing is the relationship between earnings and the productivity. Okay, earning and the productivity. Okay, is it true that people with the higher education earns and produce more than those with low education? We can have some cases like in Tanzania. We have some of the people with low education, but they have higher income earnings than those who are going to school to education. But is that always the case? That also something we have to debate in our groups. But also there's spiral over benefit of education. Okay, what is the society will benefit from education? It's also questionable. Sometimes it becomes positive, sometimes it becomes negative. And also the effect of unemployment. Someone will be educated to investors, but if he's not employed, then you find that it is loss, because you don't likely to gain from these persons because he's not involved in direct production. Another issue is the relationship between the past, the present, and the future. What we talk about valuing or changes in value of currency, cost of production for those who are undertaking a long training. Sometimes the issue of benefit cannot be quantified. And then there's this question of meaning of private rate of return. What an individual will gain from education is also questionable. So these few challenges will pose as discussion points to the class, and I expect you exhaust all of this just for you being very much aware. And then as I close up, let me discuss general factors affecting effective educational planning. One is administrative bottleneck. Capacity and ability of administrators is one of the bottleneck to educational planners. They place an immediate hindrances in the planning process. Their willingness and ability to plan will also determine effectiveness of the planning process. Second, lack of adequate demographic data. Where there's a problem of data. Collecting quality data is a problem to developing countries, also affects how we plan. But also inadequate of resources. We'll be very ambitious to plan, but sometimes we face limited resources. Therefore, we do things as business as usual. Also, there's also issue of political instability or political will. Will also determine the planning, educational planning. Sometimes you can plan, but when there's change of political regime, they come out with another sentiments. Or, for example, and that because of appealing to the majority, one will assume the leadership position and declare that we are going to offer education for all citizens. But there's no end team that has sat down to plan out of that one, and therefore we find that things are now happening as it used to happen. But also there's a waste of imbalance within the education system, okay? Failure to reach for envisioned goals, okay? There's the repetition, education system, dropout, okay? Failure to reach admission level required, etc. All this will also affect educational planning. But also there's the financial constraints. This one is almost talk about this, but specifically talk about the finance as a dependent constraints. We need the money to ensure that we plan and implement. There's also rising demand for education, okay? Unlike the early days of gaining independence in 1980s, 1960s, population was small in Tanzania, TZ. But now we are talking about more than 61 millions of citizens all need education, so sometimes planning becomes so difficult. Youth population explosion. In the population structure, majority are the youth. These are the category which you want to invest more in education, but there are also different needs of education. They have different needs of skills and knowledge. This also affects how we plan and implement education. But also there's manpower imbalance, okay, because we find that some disciplines produce more graduates than others. As well as we have these issues of cultural factors, male preferences as compared to female, male and female, okay. It's also, but some of the cultures don't consider education as the most priority, and therefore, if given the opportunity, also they fail to utilize it, and therefore, government or states will always fail to reach goals and aims as intended. Okay, having said that, thank you very much for your time, and that makes the end of this lecture, today's lecture. Thank you very much.